All right, welcome to the Art of Tarot Week 3, the Suit of Swords. We're going to get started today with a quick read. Everybody take out your cards and holding them in your hands, please contemplate a situation in your life that has been extremely difficult. Something that may have shaped you, but it shaped you because it was so difficult, not because it was easy, not because it necessarily had a good outcome even. And you're gonna think about what is it that shaped you that was so difficult. And then we're going to shuffle and we're gonna draw one card and we're gonna get a little insight from our one card about that situation. What is one piece of wisdom, one lesson, one truth, one strength that arose as a result of this very difficult situation. And you're going to just draw your one card and contemplate that card. One difficult situation, something that was very hard for you to reconcile or deal with in your life, something that didn't feel fair, felt wrong, felt painful. And we're going to draw one card that gives us a little window into a wisdom lesson, a strength, or some aspect of that situation. And then take your card and look at it and reflect on it.
And how do we do
And just shuffle and either one off the top or one from the middle, whatever feels right to you. Your one card, and what does it say about this very challenging situation in your life? Wow, that's descriptive.
And I was being attacked by a witch.
Oh,
It's
wow.
so funny that I picked that.
That really speaks to that. And did you get an email this week from me?
I did.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I have you on there. I'm just checking to make sure I have everyone's email. Who's that? Okay. Oh, okay, probably Christina. Okay, well, we have a spot for her here or whatever. All right, anyone looking at your, thank you, my dear. Anyone looking at your card who'd like to share about what this card means to your difficult circumstance, situation, or lesson? Anything you can see in it. So, Kate, can I pick on you? Oh, wait, I'll go Kate and then Carol.
Mine's kind of unusual.
Because Kate's got, I'll hold it up so folks can see. So this was the card that Kate drew. 10 of Swords. And Kate, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
I was being attacked by so many different witches. It was just ridiculous, you know. So I contacted a really high level witch, and she was attacking me herself.
Wow.
And so Savannah at Black Sheep Coven, which is a really powerful coven, she said, oh my God, you know, she had put illusion in my third eye and 3 hexes, 3 curses. This woman's supposed to be helping me.
Wow.
And Savannah just said, you have incredible light and power, and a lot of people just want to take you down. And she said, it's just going to be that way. So she's having to do some really powerful protection so that it can't keep happening. So come to find out, the woman I thought I was friends was attacking me herself. And this is the one.
And that's all those knives in the back.
Shocked and hurt. I could hardly believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very vivid, descriptive. Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
Good insight. And Carol, you had one, want to share? Again, everybody, great. Well, I'll mute everybody here. Okay. Go ahead, Carolyn, unmute.
Yeah, I thought I was going to think of one thing, and suddenly, I don't, it's been a thing this week. I was thinking about my father and his death and how badly that affected me, because we were very estranged. And I felt that, it was just a really hard time because he died. And so therefore, nothing's recoverable. Like, you don't get to say anything anymore. You're basically muted. So I was thinking about that and about how much how much I wanted to say and all that other stuff. And I pulled the 5 of Cups.
Wow.
Which was just like, okay, that's so, I mean, it's such a card of loss. It's a father card. For me,
Yeah, it's a lost, left out in the cold.
Yeah.
Everything, you think there's no going back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But on a little tiny positive note, there's still 2 upright in the background.
That's right.
And so that's what I was focusing on, because he's looking down at the 3 that are spilled, but the 2 behind him are still upright. So
all is not lost.
Yeah, and I think that my work that I've done in trying to heal that, that ancestral wound, I guess, is maybe coming to fruition at some point, that I can now look at the card and see that the 2 cups are standing instead of just focusing on the 3 that have fallen over. But still, I mean, I pulled it and I was like, really? This is the card that I pulled, but it fits the situation perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. So
yeah, thank you for sharing. It does fit that situation quite cleanly. How about, Laura's got one.
So I drew the Empress, and on my, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they can see that. I had a baby when I was 16 and placed her for adoption, and that's what I was thinking about. And it just reminded me of the mother heart, even when you can't keep the child that you love. And I don't know if you can see, but the bear standing above the Empress, it was like my love for her.
Yes.
My love for her.
This is so beautiful. May I pass your card around? This is so beautiful. It shows a mother with a daughter, and then there's this bear spirit like over them, like protecting. And you did eventually reconnect with your daughter.
We are very good friends, and we are together. Oh.
Yeah. But you did reconnect.
I did reconnect.
You did reconnect, and
So
there's that bear spirit that was there.
Always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that spirit, it's sort of like that mother bear spirit was holding space, this whole time for Laura and her daughter. And thank you for sharing. That's so deep. And wow, and so here we are having a sensitive moment, right? Laura shared something really sensitive. We're in a sensitive moment. And this is exactly what we're here to talk about today. How to handle sensitive moments in readings just like this. This is big. All of us have our pains and our wounds that we carry from this life. For me, this Knight of Pentacles showed up reversed, which was that, the difficult situation I was thinking about was one that ended up basically cutting my income by 75%, like practically overnight. So I had to deal with a huge loss of 10 years of my work. And it was very difficult to go through because of a shady business partner. Mm-hmm. And so, I have this reversed. I was working and working and working and working and grinding and then to have it just gone. So, I really, feel it myself. And when we come to this moment in a reading, and I want us to launch into this because today we're dealing with the Suit of Swords, which are the things in life that are very, very difficult and that we might not get over. There are things in life that I don't want to say that we can't have healing from, but we might never get over it. We might never feel fully reconciled with it, because they're just things like the death of a parent or an adoption or a forced situation that you don't have control over. And when you have these and you're the reader in the reading and someone is sitting in front of you, there's a real tendency to kind of like want to freeze, like, what am I going to say to this moment? This is really deep. And sometimes, you know, I myself have had people come sit in front of me for readings where I'm giving the reading, and then what ends up coming out, I'm like, wow, I think I'm out of my depth here. This isn't something that needs a reading. This is something that needs, you know, like a doctor or a psychotherapist or a lawyer or something else. And yet here we are. So when we come to those moments in readings where there's something really sensitive, we have an opportunity through the reading to help ourselves and that other person sit with the hardest thing in the world to sit with, which is discomfort. And as a reader, one of the I think the most important lessons that I can share from my own experience is you are there for the truth. You are not necessarily there to fix things. So sometimes just touching that truth, you know, that moment we just had where Laura drew that card with her own hand and is looking at it is so powerful, because I didn't draw that card for her. I didn't interpret that card for her. It's all right there in the picture. If she had come to me with that, you know, and that card came up and I showed her, I said, hey, what's this card, you know, that you picked, or this card that came up in your deck, in your reading? And she told me that, I would probably burst into tears. And in fact, I have with many clients. Sometimes a client can't cry and I'm crying for them. Sometimes a client is crying and I'm like, we both need a tissue. And then sometimes the client is crying and I am just sitting there quietly witnessing, observing, and holding space and allowing them a place to express that emotion that they might not be able to express in the doctor's office, the lawyer's office, or the therapist's office in the same way. Because I'm not, as a reader, and I'm not a representative of officialness. I'm just the fortune teller. But being just the fortune teller means that you are often in a much more intimate emotional situation than if you were in a position of officialness in another capacity. So I wanted to talk about how we handle this today. And my advice to you is to never shy away from telling the truth, even if it's painful. And if somebody brings something to your table that makes you feel anxious or uncomfortable or worried because it's so intense, to sit and be present for that discomfort for you and the other person, it's the greatest gift. I'm going to share a story of when somebody brought me, I'm going to share a couple stories today to illustrate how I handled circumstances. Year 6 as a professional reader, and I am accepting people walking in off the street. Just, you know, I don't have to know them, no referral, they just walk in. Woman walks in, sits down, gets a reading. She says, I passed up a job, and it was a job that I thought I wouldn't make enough money at. And that was 2 months ago. And now the company sold, and it sold for like billions of dollars. And the job that I would have had is like a millions now. And I need to get that job back. I want that job back. Can I go get it back? And I flipped the cards and I looked and I said, no, they've moved on. And now, especially after everything's changed, you're not going to be able to get that job back, unfortunately. I could never have been prepared for what happened next. She started to cry and I comforted her. I said, I'm so sorry. This must be so disappointing. No, she says, it's not disappointing. It's tragic. And I was like, yes, I agree. This is a tragic set of circumstances, very difficult. But, I know that your reading shows that you're very talented, that your opportunities will flourish. There are other things out there for you. And she says, "You don't understand." And she starts screaming at me in my reading room and is like screaming at me for a few minutes. And I'm like, "Tell me it'll say something different." I was like, I can't.
I would say, well, all opportunities are possible or something.
I said, well, I tried to pacify, but I won't go back on, I said, there's no getting this back. But right, no do-overs in this. But I do feel that, you will have a future beyond this, and it is challenging, but we will find the way. And it's showing here that within the next 6 months, there's another big opportunity coming. So just bide your time. Maybe it's even with the same company. You could go back and reapply for another position with them. Gets out of her chair, lays down on the floor, and starts throwing a screaming temper tantrum, literally kicking and screaming like a 2-year-old on my floor, just kicking and screaming. Now, what to do with this? So I sort of gingerly stepped over her and left the reading room, and I went out of the reading room where there were people outside in my store kind of like, what's she doing to that woman back there? And I was like, okay. And I went and I went to the front and I got my coworker and I said, "Do you think you could come back with me?" And we went back, and she's still kicking and screaming, and she won't get up, and she's kicking and screaming. And it took 2 hours.
What?
The end of the story is it took 2 hours for me to get this woman out of my store. And it finally took me saying, "I'm so sorry for everything that you've experienced, but I'm afraid that we've reached the point where if you don't leave, I'm going to be forced to call the police, because this has become quite out of hand."
Abusive to you.
And really, I don't know how to help you any further. So that was one. So sometimes I want you to understand, this is my story to illustrate the point of sometimes there's just no fixing it, and you're just going to have to deal with somebody being irate, difficult, challenging, abusive, mean, leave you a bad review because they didn't like what you said, be angry with you because you wouldn't change the cards for them, because no matter it, there's only 78. So at a certain point, even if you dealt all 78 out, there's nowhere to go from there. There's no more answers to get after all the cards in the deck have been dealt out. And it's rare in a reading that you'd need to deal them out unless you're in Mexico City, in which case they always deal the whole deck out in every reading. That's a whole other story.
They do?
Yep, totally different style of tarot reading, which I have had the privilege of having once. And she was right on. So that's illustration number 1. Sometimes there's things you just can't fix, and you just have to say to yourself, if you're reading for yourself, or to that person, there's nothing we can do here. And the one thing I would suggest is that we turn at this point to the power of prayer. That's it. That's what we can do. I can light a candle for you. I can spray you with a mist. I can wand you with a sage. I can put a crystal in your hand, and then we have to be done here. Right. And that's it. And, to hold your boundaries like that is very difficult, because I think a lot of us come into this because we're natural healer, helper spirits. We don't do this because we're just like spitballing. We do this because we care about our lives and others' lives and humanity's welfare. So that's story number 1, difficult reading. Story number 2 of a difficult reading. Possibly the most difficult reading I've ever given in my entire life happened within this past year, because I was in this building. And I did not see this one coming. I could not have predicted. Again, you just don't know. A friend reaches out, not a friend, but a client reaches out to me and says, "I know somebody who's going through a really hard time. Would you please read for him?" Yes, I will sit and I will read for him. No problem. So he's at a distance. So we are on a Zoom like this. And we sit down, and I sit down and I start the reading, and I say, what did you like? He goes, well, I'd like to look at a relationship. Okay, cool. So, we're going to learn the relationship spread. Maybe we won't learn that today. We'll learn that during cups. So I'm going to do the relationship spread. And then I say, okay, and who's this relationship? Is with this, what's the nature of the relationship? Well, as it turns out, he says, for the past 2 years, have been having an affair with my cousin. And our family found out, and they are furious. And because they found out, they really shamed us, and she won't talk to me anymore. And now I just have to talk to her, and I can't get her to talk to me. And I was like, every red flag was like, shoo, 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 shoo. I was like, okay, we've got incest. We've got weird stalker vibe. She won't talk to me. We've got whole family drama. Okay. So I was like, I just kind of breathed and collected myself. And I said, okay, so what would you like us to look at for your reading? Because I knew, and this I think is important also as a reader, that no matter what came up in those cards, the one thing I was going to say to him for sure at some point in that reading was, you know that this was wrong, don't you? And you know that this must stop, and you need to leave her alone, don't you? I knew that that was my job, because the universe put this in front of me. If the universe didn't put this in front of me, I wouldn't have a job to it. But because the universe put this in front of me, I know that I have a job. And I, as a reader, am not separate from my ethics. So if somebody comes and they sit down in front of you and they tell you something that you find ethically reprehensible or ethically questionable, you are allowed to say something about that.
Unless they're aggressive and you're alone with them.
If they're aggressive and you're alone with them, which is you definitely would then just want to be like, oh yeah, looks like happily ever after. Okay. But I highly recommend that, you never be totally alone in that situation. But you don't always know. So the man sat there and I laid the cards down. Of course, the cards said abomination, absolutely terrible, Tower, 10 of Swords, do not do this. It showed, obsession, the devil. And I was like, So I said, well, you're seeing what's right here in front of me. Here's this card and this card and this card. So this has to end. You cannot continue with this. Your family is right to have objections to this. They have every right to have this objection. And she has every right to say she doesn't want to talk to you, even ever again, maybe. And he says, well, he starts in to tell me how in ancient Egypt, sisters and brothers would marry each other to continue the family line of succession.
And how did that go?
Right. I said, we're not in ancient Egypt. We're not even in feudal Europe. We are here right now. And you know this was wrong, don't you? And you know you can't do this anymore, don't you? And it was an hour reading. I don't even know how I made it through that hour. It was very uncomfortable. And I just had to keep bringing him back to it. He just would go all over the place, wildly, all over the place. And then I would be like, come back here. And no. Finally, by the end, he was like, okay, you're right. I'll leave her alone and I'll move on with my life. He goes, and then he said, and this is the last thing he said before we closed the call. He said, it's just like what happened with my other cousin. I know. One doesn't want to laugh, but one does want to laugh. That's how life is sometimes. Laughter is, what did you tell me, Albert? Laughter is the, general, excuse my French, what the fuck response. When you're like, I don't even know what to say. Sometimes you laugh. So this was reprehensible to me. This was really my hardest reading ever because I just had to stay steady. Now, at any point during that reading, I could, and you all could, anyone can, say, you know what? And I have done this at other times. Gather up the cards and say, you know what? This isn't going to work out. I'm not going to take any money from you. I'd like you to go. and I think we should just be done. I don't think I can read for you. And you always have that prerogative. But, you know, when I myself am sitting there, I was like, well, I think I might be able to say something to him. Obviously, other people have said something to him and he isn't listening. Maybe I can say something to him. And maybe what he actually needs is not his emotionally upset family or someone else telling him. He needs a calm, authoritative woman to say in a motherly but stern way, stop it. Don't do that. And it was, in fact, very functional. A few days later, I got an email from him through our website that said, I want you to know that I've watched the recording of our reading several times and I've really listened to what you said and you're right. So that's done. Never heard from him again, thank God. That is a difficult situation when you have to make a call about whether or not you're going to go forward with someone's question. And I have ended readings and I have gathered up the cards and just been like, you know what? I don't think this is going to work. I feel like I'm not the reader for you. Sorry. But in some situations, you'll know, like, I have an intuition. I have a feeling like I'm supposed to stay the course with this difficult situation. When you do decide to do that, the best thing you can do in that circumstance is to remain as unemotional as possible. Just deliver the message, say what's there, point to the card, what this card says. This devil card says that this is an obsession and it's wrong. What this 10 of Swords says is that this is destructive and it's wrong. You know, what this card reverse, you know, the 10 of Pentacles reversed in this negative position says is that this is hurting your family, right? And you just point to it. This says this, this says this, this says this, and you just give it very deliberately. So these are some extremes. Obviously, most readings are not this extreme, but these same techniques can apply. Remaining calm, delivering the information in as factual a way as possible, pointing to the actual card and saying, look it up. Here, this Six of Pentacles represents this, or Six of Cups represents that. Look it up and you'll see. I'm not lying to you. Sometimes you'll find yourself in other circumstances where somebody just breaks down and they're sad and they are weeping. I keep a box of tissues in my reading room, and I used to just automatically, when someone started crying, hand them a tissue. And then I read an article that said that handing someone a tissue when they start crying sometimes stops them from crying because they think you're handing them the tissue not for the sake of their convenience or their dignity, but that they think you're saying, stop crying. So I don't anymore now. I sit there and I let them cry for a minute. And then after, if they seem like they're getting a little messy, then I hand. If they start getting like this, then I'm like, here, would you like a tissue? But I don't hand it right away. I've learned to just be present with people's shadow and their crap. And some of the moments that have come as the result of just being willing to stay there with that have been so amazing. Even though I really am like glad I never heard from that guy again, I'm actually really glad that he sent me that email to tell me I watched the video several times and what you said is right and I'm going to listen. Because maybe I did get through to him in a way that his family didn't or others didn't. I like to think that he said that.
Yeah, completely non-biased person.
Yeah, just a non-biased person. So when we are doing our difficult work with, as readers of the tarot, we sometimes are going to have to confront things in ourselves or with others that are very, very challenging. And this is what the Suit of Swords is about. The Suit of Swords is the element of air in the tarot. So it's the element of the breath, speech, words, inspiration and thoughts, imagination. And as a result of being that element of air, it's difficult to pin down. Like you can't really grasp the air. So it's difficult to kind of anchor it to something. Just the same way that sometimes when we're going through a time of feeling depressed or really sad, we might be able to point to the source of that, but we also might not. It might just be like a jumble of things and we feel bad. The Suit of Swords is like that. The Suit of Swords often describes the things where we look back and it's very challenging for us to figure out why this had to happen this way. Why me? The Suit of Swords is famous for why me. In one of my favorite decks, the Mythic Tarot by Juliet Sharman Burke, what she does, which I think is very useful, is that she builds each of the suits around one mythological story. And she takes the whole mythological story through that series of, ace through king. So in her deck, in the Suit of Swords, she describes the Greek Oresteia, the legend of Orestes, and his father Agamemnon, his mother Clytemnestra, his sister Iphigenia, and his father's lover Cassandra. In the Oresteia, it's an epic Greek tragic play. Agamemnon goes off to war in the Trojan War, and the ships won't sail. And so they need to call a wind. And they do a divination and they find out that in order to call the wind, he has to make a sacrifice, and he has to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia. And so he sends for his daughter. He fools his wife into sending him his daughter, and he sacrifices her. And the mother finds out, and she goes crazy with grief. And Agamemnon goes on, and they defeat, they defeat the Trojans, and he gets a woman named Cassandra who is captive, and he takes her as a concubine, and she is a prophet, a seer, and he brings her back to his home, and his wife welcomes them. And as Cassandra is crossing the threshold of the home where she will now live as a kept concubine, she goes into a trance and she starts to scream out that she sees blood on the floor, because she's predicting that there's going to be something that happens. And sure enough, Agamemnon and Cassandra are in bed together, and Clytemnestra comes and she kills them both, the wife. And Orestes decides that in order to avenge his father, he will kill his mother. So he kills her. Now, in ancient Greece, killing your mother means that you get set upon by the harpies, the Furies, these demonic women, goddesses, who come and chase him, and they chase him to the ends of the earth. He can't rest. He can't sleep. He's being tormented. His every waking hour is a nightmare. His sleeping is a nightmare, and he can't get any relief. And so Juliet Sharman Burke tells the entire Oresteia through her Suit of Swords, from the ace being the first card being Athena, the goddess of justice, is set upon to deal with this situation. And then the 2 shows Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, and the 3 shows the killing of Iphigenia, and the 4, and it goes on like this. And eventually Athena comes back and she says, she sees the whole situation. She says, this family is cursed now forever. There's no getting rid of this curse. But Orestes will stop being chased by the Erinyes, the Furies. So she describes, and then the king is Agamemnon, the queen is Clytemnestra, the jack is Orestes, the page is I think is Zephyrus, the wind that blew the message in of Iphigenia being sacrificed. So The suit of swords is a difficult suit. Let's pull out all of our swords now and put them in order, and I'm going to walk you through them because there are no happy endings in the suit of swords. Really.
Isn't mine the worst one you could pick?
That's conventionally considered one of the worst cards in the deck, and she picked the 10 of swords.
I'd say the 5 of swords.
The 5 is rough, although the 5 I have learned to appreciate it. I'll tell you about it when we go through it. There's good and bad about each, but the suit of swords is not really a suit of happy endings. It's a suit of tests of your strength, tests of your will, your fortitude. It's a suit that's very much related to betrayal, voicelessness. So we have to be very kind of careful when we get into the suit of swords, when you start to see those swords, because it often means, ooh, we're in that kind of territory where there might be some tears that come. There might be some sad moments in this reading, and you might not end up getting a happy ending in this reading.
Oh my God, look at that. The illustration of this 10 of swords.
The 10 of swords is not easy.
It's like someone with 10 swords in their back, and the point is
I was
like it only
talking about-
takes one to kill you,
Right.
and they use 10.
And that they would use
I was
10.
talking about people stabbing me in the back.
Yes, you were literally talking about people stabbing you in the back, and then you pulled the card where they're stabbing you in the back. And the Queen of Swords is there, and she's got a whole other layer. We'll talk about her in a minute. We're going to just go through the whole suit. So just put them in order. Ace through king.
Not even the ace of swords. That's always a good card.
Well, the ace is relatively benign in context. It's true.
In context. Let's put that in.
It's it is
Where
relatively
the tower
benign.
looks like a bad one.
The tower is not an easy card. It can be okay, but it's not an easy card for sure. Okay, getting to my oops.
Swords speak kind of like when you think of the Tibetan Buddhism and Shri with the sword, or Shiva with the sword, you have to use the sword to destroy our ignorance.
Well, I will say, yes, I think that it can have that implication in a way. Most people who are seeking readings don't want to hear that it's time to enlighten themselves by volitionally cutting away their ego, but some do.
I'm just saying the situation
No,
that a
yeah.
person might be going through is always, anytime you have something hard, it's slowly broke and get the light on the other side.
One hopes. Although I will say, not everyone is able to turn that shadow into light. So I think this is part of the reason why we're covering swords today, along with how to deal with the difficult reading, because it's both. Sometimes you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, no, you're not getting back together. And the person is like, and you say, you're going to be better off because you're not in this relationship anymore. Trust me, it's better. And the person could care less that it's better, and they're just mad. So then how do you deal with, I know I'm right? I'm telling you this, like it says it, like hang in there. Yes, you have this 3 of swords. Yes, it's the 5 of cups. Yes, you're super sad. Look how terrible with this tower. But on the other side of it, there's that King of Cups, which is that the relationship that comes next will be much better. And the person could care less about that King of Cups. They're like, what, never, So I think it's both. Yes, you're right. But I would say this, that not all of our challenges, all of our challenges in life can help us to grow. I would say this, when we have a challenge in life and somebody says to us, well, everything happens for a reason, it can do more damage than if we just get down in it with the person and say, this really stinks. and I'm sorry. So we have, as readers, you're absolutely right. We can see that bigger picture, you know, and go, oh, yeah, you're right. You know, this is ego. And maybe if someone seems open to it, we can push it a little and get that message across. But sometimes that's going to make them even more upset. So we have to be careful, because we still have to tell them the truth, but we have to join them in their feelings about the truth rather than to try to, you know, you can kind of be like, there's better out there, don't worry, but they might not join you in it, is all I'm saying. So I think you're absolutely right, you know. I think that conventionally speaking, the Suit of Swords is about the things that it might take years for us to ever come to understand why it happened. Whereas the Suit of Wands is about the things where we're like, oh, that was an invigorating, all right, I feel stronger, I'm going to do something. You've got that spark, that fire in you. Whereas with the air, the wind, it's almost like something that just cuts through you and you're like, you just left shredded and you don't know why. You know, it might take years for it to unfold. So let's walk through the Ace of Swords. So the Ace of Swords is the power of one. I'm going to just let you know, if somebody says, am I going to get into a relationship, and you get this card, the answer is no. Not anytime soon. The Ace of Swords is about thinking about something, but thoughts are not bringing it any closer. So you're thinking about it, the idea has come, the desire might be there, but you're not able to move the needle. You're not able to really get traction. So the Ace of Swords, while not bad, you're right, Anka, it's not bad. It's insubstantial results. We might call this insubstantial results. Another reader I knew called this card Get to the Point, where you come to like understanding a single point about it.
So if somebody says, am I going to get that job, and they pull that card, what does that mean? Not likely?
Well, not necessarily not likely. It's not a great card for relationships, but I would say it's saying, yes, not certain about something more like a job. Insubstantial results is a good way to put it. You know, insubstantial results. Like, yes, you've maybe put in your application, gone for the interview, but really they're not decided yet. And you're just not there's nothing you can do to make it go any quicker. Or really somebody's like, I'm ready for a relationship, but it's not coming. There's not anything you can do to make it go quicker. This is a timing thing, not a circumstance thing.
This looks worse though.
Yes, we're going to get there in a minute. So the Two of Swords is after that Ace of Swords. You know, that Ace of Swords is insubstantial results. The Two of Swords is when you're at an impasse. No going forward, no going back. There's no movement in the Two of Swords. You're standing at a crossroads and there's no way to know which way to go. And maybe there's danger down both roads, or there's obstacles down both roads. So the Two of Swords comes up a lot when people are sort of like trying to get somewhere with something and they're really working hard at it and it's just not coming to fruition, or they're having obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. Here's the saving grace of the Two of Swords, where I'd say the saving grace of the Ace of Swords in substantial results is anything's possible. The saving grace of Ace of Swords is anything's possible. It could change. The challenge of the Two of Swords is you're stuck. You're at an impasse. No going forward, no going back. And the saving grace of it is hang out and wait. Let things ripen. Let things happen around you. So Two of Swords can be like a little sacred pause where you get a chance to reevaluate and to think about your goals and to think about what you've been working on, and maybe you kind of come, if you just back off from that plan or that path you've been trying so hard to access, you actually might get to the point where you're like, maybe there's another way this could be done if you just give yourself that spaciousness.
Indecision or
It could be for you, because remember, you're going to establish your own set of meanings based on your own experiences. I tend to associate indecision with the Seven of Swords, which we'll get to in a minute. And I'll tell you why when we get there, but you might find that this does yield indecision for you. You see how it comes up in readings over time, and it will reveal to you what it means. The Three of Swords, heartache, betrayal, and unavoidable truth. Three of Swords, heartache, betrayal, and unavoidable truth. Where, yeah, that's why the heart has the three swords in it in some decks. The Three of Swords is what happens often. I call this a breakup card. It's a relationship has come to an end, or an opportunity has come to an end, or no, you're not going to get that job, or no, your family's not going to come around, whatever it is, whatever you're dealing with. This card usually means there's not really any good outcome here for you, particularly in relation to others in this situation. And you're at significant risk to be betrayed in this situation. Yeah, you're exposed, it's painful, it's vulnerable. The saving grace of the Three of Swords, there's only up from here. This is not good, but it can improve, and it will improve, and there will be a new light at the end of the tunnel. But this is where, you pull the Three of Swords and you're just like, often by the time somebody comes to see me, this is already in the past. It's just happened. And it'll come up and I'll go, wow, you went through something, didn't you? That looks like you went through a big betrayal. And they're like, how did you know? I know because this card told me so. So the Three of Swords is that heartache, betrayal, and truth. But the saving grace is that there's nowhere to go but up. I have a Four of Swords here somewhere. Where is it? Maybe it fell. Or maybe it's still in my deck. Okay, great. The Four of Swords. Repose. So after you've been through a heartache, what is the thing that almost everyone needs to do? We need to sort of rest, recover, shelter in place, kind of go into your sense of your own security, and maybe turn off the world for a while, right? So in the Four of Swords, we've been through something so hard in the Three of Swords that we choose in the Four of Swords. Yep. Often it shows a person laying on top of a coffin with swords hanging above them in traditional Rider-Waite style decks. In this deck, it shows this warrior, and he's sitting beneath a tree in a contemplative pose. This is the quiet after the storm. I call this card the quiet after the storm. It's what happens when you kind of have to take shelter after a difficult time. And the difficulty of the Four of Swords is that you feel alone. You feel like you're isolated. Even if you've isolated yourself, you still feel alone and maybe a little isolated. But there's also peace in it. So you're coping with your emotions in solitude, but you're also at least at peace. So when we get the Four of Swords, it's a great time to give the client the advice, why don't you just take a little while and rest? Take some time, relax. Devora, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm sorry if you said this already. What deck is that? That's a beautiful card.
Oh, this deck, is this the Druidcraft Tarot? This is called the Druidcraft.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have anything like that, of course, on the Thoth.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, it's quite lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
The art is very vivid. Thank you. So your Four of Swords, you know, your difficulty with the Four of Swords is isolated and alone, but your saving grace is shelter in place and take refuge, take peace, rest, recover. You can come back to it. So now moving on to the Five of Swords.
Saving grace.
Saving grace is, you know, you can rest and relax and come back to it. And you need more quiet time. You know, when I will say, I get the Four of Swords a lot for mothers who do too much, exhausted mothers. They'll come in and their reading is just like, they're like asking about, you know, are my kids going to be okay? And I've got this one kid who's got, you know, difficulties, and I've got another kid who's like going through puberty, and I'm working, and my husband and I have been fighting, or we're having a hard time, and I just don't know what to do. What should I do? I'll get the Four of Swords a lot for women who are in that position. And I say, you need alone time. You need to remove yourself from everybody in that situation and go like hang out on a Saturday by yourself and say to your husband and your children, listen, you are ungrateful and I don't want to spend time with you. I'm leaving and I will be back later today. Good luck. Have a good day. There's stuff in the you can put stuff in the microwave and get out of town. Go do something. Get away. Let them miss you. That's another piece of that Four of Swords. Let them miss you. And if you get this card for yourself, you might find that it's wise to let yourself be missed. Let them miss you. Travel. Yes, Laura says, travel. Yes, that's right. Oh my gosh, just as an aside, totally unrelated to this, I saw something so cute and funny online yesterday. It was, I belong to this group. It's called Women Who Travel, and it's by Condé Nast magazine, and they put together a Facebook group called Women Who Travel. And if anyone you want to join it, it's fantastic. Women share photos of their travels all over the world and recommendations and everything. There's this one woman in the group, and what she had posted were pictures. One picture showed her standing in front of the Eiffel Tower kissing a guy, and then the next showed her in Rome kissing a different guy. And then there was another one somewhere else kissing a different guy. And she said, I wonder if the guy in Paris, the guy in Rome, and the guy in the other place who agreed to pose with me kissing so that I could look like I was having a romantic vacation are all doing good. She had just gone to these places that invited random men to kiss her for a picture. And I just loved it. So anyway, it has nothing to do with the class, but just a little funny story about traveling. If you're gonna, you know, go have one in every port, you know. So the Five of Swords. Let's get to the Five of Swords. So Christine said, "Oh, I don't like this card. You know, I don't like the look of it."
Well, this particular card,
Thank you,
it
my
says a
love.
lot.
Oh yeah. So in this card, yikes! There's a woman. She's got two swords stuck in her back. She's walking away. She's trailing blood behind her on her beautiful white dress. And there's this guy with angel wings and swords over his shoulder walking away.
And he's also looking at
But he's like looking back over his shoulder. So I understand why this is awful. You know, Five of Swords. This is
this five?
yeah. No, that's the set. No, that's the five. Yeah, that's the five. So I'm going to pass this one around if I may, so folks can take a look at that awful picture of trepidation and depredation.
That's so much different than
In many of the Five of Swords, you have, let me have yours. You have something more like this. Traditional white Rider-Waite shows one guy's got all five swords and everyone's sort of walking away defeated, and he's kind of like, ha, I got all the swords. He's got a little bit of an attitude. You can see it on his little face. He's smirking at the people retreating, and they're kind of going away beaten. In my Five of Swords, it shows a master standing with a sword at the beginning of what ostensibly might be somebody's trial or initiation, their trial by fire. And so the Five of Swords is, in its negative aspect, it's about feeling pinned to the wall. I call this card pinned to a board like a butterfly. You know how when you see scientific exhibitions of butterflies, they're pinned to like a cork board? That's what this card is in the negative. You're pinned to the board like a butterfly. Sword through your, needle through your chest, stuck. But the good thing now, the positive about this card, and I do get this card in the positive sometimes, is when you have somebody in your life who's willing to hold your feet to the fire to make you face something, deal with something, grow, or change. So the negative of it is when you're feeling really powerless and stuck and you're not sure if you're going to get any kind of help or if you're ever going to get free. But the positive is more like, imagine if you were Houdini's apprentice. Let's say you wanted to be a great escape artist, magician. You were apprenticed to Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini would put you in a straitjacket and be like, okay, get out of it. And you'd have to work with your training to do that. The positive of the Five of Swords is when there's somebody in our lives, it might be our therapist, it might be a parent, it might be a partner, it might be a really good girlfriend who we can trust, who's willing to go, I see what you're doing there, and I'm just not going to let you get away with it. So the positive of the Five of Swords is discipline, personal discipline. You grow in your personal discipline as a result of this card, even though it might feel for a time like you're powerless or you're trapped or you're stuck or you're, burdened by someone else's expectations. I like to think of this as like the, the Shaolin masters who are like punching at a concrete slab and they want to break it, and they just punch and punch and punch until their knuckles are bloody, but finally they break the thing. And there is a time in life for that. Not every day, fortunately, but there is a time in life to bloody your knuckles trying to break that concrete, because you will do it. And that is when the Five of Swords can be a good thing. So in those situations, like I get that card, like a lot of times somebody's like, oh my God, things at work have been so hard. And I just feel like I'm working so hard and it's not going anywhere and I'm not getting anywhere. And I might see that Five of Swords followed by like, say, a Nine of Pentacles. And I'm like, no, keep going. Like double down. Now's the time. Go ahead. Just take it, own it, shoulder it. You will get through this. And on the other side of that is this Nine of Pentacles, which is like, yay, money and relaxation and rest and freedom and peace. You hear that? Okay. I want my Nine of Pentacles. Six of Swords. So now that we've gone through our trial by fire under that Five of Swords, or really our trial by steel, we're in the Six of Swords. And this is one of the few cheerier of the Swords cards. The Six of Swords is the calm after the storm. So you've been through the betrayal, you've been through that solitude, you felt stuck, you felt pinned to your fate, you felt trapped, and all of that all that storm has happened in your life. And now the Six of Swords, and often the Six of Swords are depicted with two people in a ship, a boat, and in the back of the boat, you see like really ripply waters, and ahead of the boat, you see smooth waters. So that's a good sign. The hardest part is behind you now. And this card comes up really when it's like, okay, listen, the worst of it is behind you. This card will come up and it's like, oh, thank God, a saving grace, a moment where you're like, I can have rest, I can have a little reprieve, I can relax. The hardest part is now behind me. That difficulty, that betrayal, that testing. when we get the Six of Swords, we've also crossed a point of no return. So
I'm not seeing it or something.
you're not finding your Six?
Is that? Oh, okay, it's that
Mhm.
one. Okay.
So in this, may I see yours? Thank you. So in this one you see, and it actually, I have to say, this has actually been something that I've noticed very vividly is how many times I see these photos of refugees in boats going from Syria elsewhere, and how much it looks like this card, where it's like they're huddled in the boat and they're just trying to get across the water to safety. So there's something about, you know, like feeling like a refugee amidst this, but landing on safe shores. You're headed towards safe shores. It's got to be better where you're going than it is where you've been. Thank you.
I'm always kind of touched with the scene too, of the woman and the child and the man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's very protective.
Yeah. Really is. And it's nurturing. There's something there that's like relief. They are tired,
They're being taken care of.
but they're being taken care of. They've been protected and watched over. And if you get that card in relation to other cards that are very like divine intervention type cards, like say the Temperance card or the Judgment card or the Star, you know, then you're like, you've got somebody watching over you, you know, you've got a little divine grace. Okay, the Seven of Swords. The Seven of Swords is deceit, lies, but it's cheating. I one time had I had a partner I was dating, and she went on a trip, and I remember sitting there after she was on this trip, and I was crying this one night. I couldn't stop crying. I was feeling in a terrible mood, and I just felt something was wrong. And then she got back, and I asked her, I was like, did something happen while you were gone? What's going on? And she was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. 2 weeks later, she said to me, I'm really feeling like I need a reading. And I said, okay. So I sat down, I flipped the cards over. This one came up. I was like, what have you not told me? And she was like, I slept with someone else. And I was like, yeah, I know. And that was my confirmation. Not the smartest thing to do in the world if you're going to try to cheat on somebody, to then have them read for you. But I think that's how she wanted me to know. So long and short of it was that with the Seven of Swords, there's lying, there's deceit, there's cheating. That's like the negative end of that spectrum. On the, let's say, more benign end of that spectrum, it's like waffling, uncertainty, non-committal, wishy-washy, uncertainty, just feeling like, I don't know. I'm not ready to commit. Maybe not, I'm not sure. So when you get the Seven of Swords, you know, it depends on context, but one of the things I've frequently found with this card is that it's more often about somebody's general wishy-washiness or uncertainty than it is about somebody actively doing something terrible. But sometimes it is about someone actively doing something terrible, and so in the reading there will be a context. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you see that in this? Because I see like a studious person writing.
Mm-hmm. So Anka's asked, how is this in this card? This is a studious person writing. But his head is in his hands.
Yeah.
So he's here, right?
Yeah.
He's got, he's, and what it looks like he's doing is it looks like he's a manuscript illustrator.
Right, or writing.
And if you know the history of manuscript illustrators, a lot of them went blind. A lot of them struggled and suffered because they put themselves through hell. For this deck, the artist has chosen to interpret this as maybe frustration. you know, because he's diligent, but he's frustrated. But this is the only, I've never seen another interpretation of it that was quite like this. Usually it shows somebody's got a bundle of swords over their shoulder and they're kind of sneaking away and they're like, I've got my swords, you know, and it's like, yeah, there we go. Yeah. And there's a little devilish look on the face. You know, if you have a Rider-Waite deck, is kind of like a little nasty look over the shoulder. So, you know, the artist of the Druidcraft Tarot has chosen to interpret it this way, but there's, you know, in this one, he's clearly frustrated, you know, and poring over something, and it's late into the night, you know, and one might say he, you know, he's a little bit at his wit's end, you know. So, you know, like you doing the reading might see that, since that's the image in your card, the Seven of Swords might not mean deceit for you. It might, a different card might mean that, because the pictures are different. But remember, I'm just sharing my versions.
No,
but
I like it, but I wanted to see how could I see
Or
that
maybe
in there, because I trust, you know, you've been doing it for a long time.
Maybe he's writing something he doesn't feel good about.
Oh yeah, that's
Wow.
true. He might be like having an unfortunate duty to write something. In my Seven of Swords, this person is, I mean, my Seven of Swords is a person is like mystically elevating a cat with a sword over his shoulder. So he's like levitating a cat. I don't know if he's stealing the cat. I'm not sure what's happening here, but I know what the Seven of Swords means just from doing readings. This one, the picture isn't so great. Did not always.
How would you determine in a reading whether it meant somebody was being deceived or their partner was wishy-washy? Like, what would you look at?
So let's say, I mean, if it was a partnership reading, you know, and another person, or, you know, two people, and one of them is showing up as that Seven of Swords, I would pull another card and put it on top of that. I'd go, show me what this is, the nature of this. And then if it were something like, let's say that the Eight of Wands lands on it, right? If it's like the Eight of Wands, and, you know, out of all the possible choices, you have so many choices that might land on it. But let's say the Eight of Wands lands on it. I say, well, you know what? This person is sort of like on the fence about commitment, but you're going to know very soon where they stand, because the Eight of Swords hastens the rest of a reading. If it's the Three of Swords that comes up on top of it, I might, or the Five of Cups, I might be like, there's, or the Queen of Wands or the King of Wands, there's certain, I might be like, oh, there's a person involved here. If it's something more like there's that Seven of Swords, and then on top of it comes the Ten of Pentacles, I might be like, oh, did you recently have a conversation about having children? And did the person then like get spooked? Because, you know, we've now entered a territory that's a little bit more intimidating to talk about in a relationship situation. So, you know, when you're unsure, you can always pull another card and be like, I need some clarity. Let's bring in another view. And that'll help you discern.
What was its saving grace?
Oh, the saving grace of the Seven of Swords is diplomacy. You know, sometimes the line between being non-committal and being diplomatic is a very fine line. You just have to be like more diffuse about things. You have to just, you know, maybe somebody says, oh, you know, like, I really want you to donate to my cause. And you're like, I don't know if I really want to donate to this cause. So you may say, oh, I'll look into it. That's a positive side of diplomacy. You don't want to hurt someone's feelings, but you know, you might not actually decide to do the donation. So that would be the saving grace. The Eight of Swords, stuck between a rock and a hard place. That's what I call this card. And the other name for this card in my lexicon is a prison of one's own making. Whatever's going on here, when I get this card, you know, well, okay, we were together and then we broke up and then he said he was sorry, so I took him back. And then after I took him back, I wasn't really sure if I should have, but I did because he said it would change. And then 6 months later, back to the same thing. And I'm like, well, honey, there's nothing going on here you didn't sign up for. As long as you're with this guy, this is who he is. He's showing you who he is. It's not going to change, you know? So the Eight of Swords is that feeling that you're stuck and you don't know where to go, but you really have to recognize that maybe you did it to yourself. That maybe you tolerated substandard treatment. That maybe you were the person who allowed someone into your life who wasn't up to standard. You know, this is a great card for determining what your part was in a conflict or situation. Like, is there anywhere where I myself did something that led to this?
This is so different to me than that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kind of, when you say
Mhm.
that, it's like floating and
Mm-hmm. It's
neither here nor there.
interestingly because this, can I see your Seven of Swords? So it looks like in the Seven of Swords in your deck, what we've got is delusion. And in the Eight of Swords, what we've got is kind of like coping by not coping.
Mhm.
So I think in your deck, it's a little bit different, and everybody's decks might be different. But in the, you know, it looks, I mean, Seven of Swords can be about delusion. You know, it can be about delusion in certain decks. I usually put delusion somewhere else, but it's clear from here, like here he is, he's dancing, he's got the fox fur. The fox is a symbol of cunning.
Mhm.
And you know, in the Eight, it's just like floating like a butterfly, you know, and there's sort of a non-committal energy here. So I'd say it's, you know, for yours, it's a little separate, but for me, you know, often, and in many Rider-Waite based decks, the Eight of Swords shows a person standing surrounded by swords in the ground, and they're kind of just stuck. But if you really look, like they could free themselves. They could get out of there. They just would need to move these swords. So it's kind of like, you know, you're going to have to take some initiative here. And I can see with yours, Laura, you know, that if you saw that card, one thing you might, in your Eight of Swords, one thing you might say is, it looks like you're going to have to find a way to take some initiative.
Yeah, because it's just floating. Like,
You
oh,
can't just
I'm
drift
here,
forever, right?
But I'm not over there.
Right.
Kind of floating along.
So the saving grace of the Eight of Swords is that sometimes you're supposed to just sit still and observe. So if you've been feeling in the Seven of Swords, non-committal, uncertain, unsure, and then you've got this Eight of Swords that says just sit tight and wait, because you've gotten yourself into this mess and you're not going to be able to get out of it overnight.
Yeah. Mhm.
So sometimes it can be that, you know, and in that way, the Seven of Swords and the Two of Swords share something in common. There's like a pause, or there's, you know, with the two, sometimes it's a block or an obstacle, whereas with the Eight, it's more of like feeling stuck or trapped. Go ahead.
You said 7.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I meant
Got it,
7.
got
I'm
it.
sorry. Yeah, the 2 and the 8. I'm so
Like,
sorry.
Nope. I get it.
Okay, so let's move on to the 9. The 9 of Swords. On the, yeah, this one is fear, crippling fear.
Oh, right.
And I also associate the 9 of Swords with insomnia, sleeplessness, and anxiety, high anxiety. When I get this 9 of Swords, I usually can feel the anxiety coming off the person. They're scared.
Mhm.
And the 9 of Swords sometimes is like feeling hunted or haunted. Sometimes the 9 of Swords is about how we've placed so much faith in our fear that we're actually manifesting it. And so we have to be cautious when you get that 9 of Swords for yourself or for a querent, that you aren't reinforcing by talking to them about this, that you aren't reinforcing their fears. You can say, I can see that this makes you very afraid. And maybe if there's a tower as an outcome or a devil as an outcome, something kind of, you know, 10 of swords as an outcome, or, you know, some other card that suggests a difficult outcome, you may say your fears are warranted. And now you're going to have to become calm so that you can make good decisions about what's going to happen next, because this is going to be difficult. You know, sometimes you get the 9 of swords when someone's afraid that they're going to go to jail. Sometimes you get the, you know, I've gotten that one. Sometimes you get the 9 of swords when someone's afraid of, you know, facing the consequences of their actions, something they've done. So sometimes your job with the 9 of swords is to like hold the person's hand and give them the bravery to walk through it. And sometimes your job is to say to them, your fears are warranted. Perhaps it's a good idea to go in a different direction. You're right. It's probably not all going to work out the way you're hoping it would. And I don't want to be mean, but I want you to know, because forewarned is forearmed. The saving grace of the 9 of swords is that our fears are generally worse than the actual outcome of anything. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. We feel afraid of this pain. We feel afraid of it. But really, it's not that bad once you do it. So just remember, it's rarely as bad as you think it's going to be, or you pretend, or you foretell it's going to be. And so to keep someone cool in that situation is a great gift as a diviner, because then you're not scaring them worse. They're already scared enough. The 10 of swords.
That's my card.
This one's a really hard one. I mean, it is, I remember in my very first deck of tarot cards, I wrote the word utter ruin. I wrote the words utter ruin about this card. Utter ruin. Everything just goes down. It's to me, the worst card in the deck, really. Harder than the Tower, harder than the Devil. In your Tower, you're going to have a sudden change, and it might be hard, but you're going to be okay. Because the Star follows the Tower. In the Devil card, you're going to have a power struggle. There's some kind of a challenging outcome, but you're going to make it through. You can be strong, carry the light within. This 10, the 10 of swords, you get it and you go, there's just no getting out of this. There's just no getting out of this. There's no fixing it. There's no, you're going to have to just deal with it. And then you do, eventually you cope with it. But for you, it was where you turned for help that turned out to be hurting you.
Yeah, I couldn't have been more shocked. The
Right.
woman that was supposed to be my friend trying to help me was actually trying to take me down. I couldn't hardly believe it.
Exactly. So that's what this card is about. It's like the ultimate, just when you thought you were safe to go back in the water, dun, 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 dun. It's a really scary card. So when you get this 10 of swords, hopefully it's rare. It's just, I really think at that point you can say to the person, just let it go and let the universe drive. Let things unfold the way they need to unfold. Take a step back, breathe, and eventually some help will come.
A friend of mine had an HIV diagnosis right after getting that card.
Yes. I've had more than one person come to me with this card and be like, am I going to go to jail? Am I going to do it? And I'm like, yes, you are. This card came up. Actually, I did a deathbed reading for a client who was with me for over a decade. And this card and the death card came up. And I just looked at it and I was like, honey, you're not going to get out of this one. And she was like, I can tell. She could feel it. She called me to her deathbed for a reading. And I was able to help her see that she was going to die. And that's one of the things in modern medicine, they don't ever really tell you you're dying, even when you're dying. So not anymore, they don't really say it. They'll just say, well, prognosis isn't good, or, but they'll never say you're dying. And
They'll say, go get hospice.
They'll say it's time to put you in palliative care,
Or just live your life. Do
or
whatever
just
you
do
wanna
it.
do.
Yeah,
or
do what you do.
Get
live your
your
life.
things in order.
Get your things in order, right? So this is that card. This is the get your things in order, or this is the go just try and, Fortunately, the saving grace of the Ten of Swords is that I do believe this is that moment when the divine steps in and says, okay, it's enough. The karma is cleared. The suffering is done. It's not going to get any worse. Relax. Let it wash over you and pass over you. And then when the dust clears, rebuild.
Is
And-
it meant for me?
Well, you did. You took the shreds of trust that you had left after that circumstance. You placed them in somebody who came well recommended and who you felt like you could. So you did. You reclaimed and rebuilt. I think about this card when I think about I was part of a really exciting project in 2016 where I helped raise funds so that a Tibetan temple could be built. It was already there. It was a very small temple, and the nuns wanted a bigger temple. And they went to get the permit for the temple, and they had gotten it all geared up. They were all ready. They went to the Chinese government, and they said, can we get the permit to build the temple? And the Chinese government said, no, you can't. You cannot build a new temple. You have to you can renovate the one you have. So what that nun did was she went and she left the door frame of the original temple and destroyed the rest of the building and built a whole new building around that original door. And so when the government officials came and they were like, we said you couldn't build a new temple. She said, I didn't. I just expanded my existing one. So, saving grace of the Ten of Swords. And what was interesting about that situation is that when they did build that bigger temple, they used pieces of brick and rubble that were there from when the Chinese government had destroyed a temple in 1959. And the rubble had been sitting there for 50 years in a pile, never cleaned up. And so all the workers went and got those old bricks and built the new temple out of them. So the saving grace of the Ten of Swords is that once it's all torn down, you can take the shreds and threads of it and you can rebuild. Okay, so getting through 4 more, and then we're going to do a spread. Page of Swords, the card of the successful student. When somebody's thinking about going to get a degree or going back to school, or they're worried about their kid, or they're worried about what's going to happen with their career, you can say, is there any professional training you've been thinking about getting? Are you thinking about going for a certification? Have you been thinking about doing some education? And that's the successful student. The Knight of Swords is the card of the successful teacher. I associate the Knight of Swords being somebody with wisdom to share, who's eager to get in and help create positive change, somebody who stands up for truth and justice. I also feel like this is like the card of using your vote as a powerful tool. It's the card of using the system and getting good results. So like if you have to go fight a ticket, or if, because it was unfair, or if you have, a circumstance where you have a tenant who hasn't been paying rent and you're going to need to go and like do some paperwork. So this is the card of like using the system to fix things, and a card of education and educators. The Queen of Swords. The best part of the Queen of Swords is that she is like, very honest, no holds barred, truthful, fierce, powerful. She's not afraid to speak her mind. She's not afraid to, she's not in a popularity contest, let's put it that way. She's not afraid if people don't like what she has to say, she's gonna be heard. This is the great thing about the Queen of Swords. She's like Judge Judy. You know, if you're no whining, no, don't lie to her, she'll know. You know, she's tough. She's very tough. The challenge of the Queen of Swords, the challenges of the Queen of Swords are infertility and female health issues, widowhood, loneliness. And so when you get the Queen of Swords, depending on the context, look to see where it's at. I got this card, I've gotten this card more than once when I had a client who ended up having a diagnosis of breast cancer. I've gotten this card more than once when I had a client who couldn't have a baby. So that's the challenge of that Queen of Swords. And then the King of Swords, this is my Albert, he's a King of Swords. This is a man who will never lie to you. He's honest. He's very attentive. He doesn't miss a trick. He's diligent. He's thoughtful. Sometimes he thinks too much and he gets stuck in his head. Sometimes he gets a little airy-fairy, but he will never lie to you. And he's good to his word, a man of strong character and integrity. If you get it reversed, there may be some challenges to his integrity. Okay, so we've worked our way through the suits. Now through the suit of swords. So now I want to talk about two things. The readings that change our lives and the spread for past, present, and future. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate. This spread that I'm teaching you is like my all-purpose readings spread. This spread is, I use this for I could use this for any question. You could use this for almost any question. It's like a modified Celtic cross. I don't use the Celtic cross spread. If you like it, great. You should absolutely use it. If you want to learn the Celtic cross spread, you just type it into Google and you'll find 8,000 blogs about it. Everyone will give you their impression of the Celtic cross. I myself didn't feel like it fully answered the questions I wanted to ask, so I modified it. And that's how I developed this spread, which is sort of like, it builds on the issue, action, and outcome in a way. It builds, or the past, present, future spread, the 3-card spread in a way. So it does analyze sort of the context of what's coming in right now, what's happening, why is it happening, and what's going to happen next. So does anyone have a benign question? Not necessarily a life-changing question, although who knows, but maybe you've got a question that I could answer for you in a demo. Anybody brought a question today for a thing? Okay, go ahead, Anka.
Just about teaching an art class.
About teaching an art class. Anka wants to teach an art class. Should she teach an art class? And we're going to find out. So I'm going to just turn us this way so that I can demonstrate. Great Mother.
Is it paint?
It's mine.
Is
Holy
it drawing or painting, oil painting?
I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Great Mother, Holy Mother, wise and gentle Mother, abundant and loving Mother, protective and healing Mother, I call to you. I'm here today with Anka, and together we're seeking information and guidance about Anka's desire to teach an art class. Is it time? If so, how will she know? what type of class might be good, or is there a deeper meaning to her teaching art at this time in her life? What do we need to know for Anka about teaching an art class? And we call upon all the benevolent ancestors, guardians, and guides who walk through this life with Anka. We ask you to be here now and guide this reading. We come to this reading together today with courage and strength, honesty and integrity, love, compassion, and gratitude for the journey of life. And may what we learn here today be of benefit to Anka, and turning outward, may what we learn here today in some way, great or small, also be of benefit to the entire universe. For Anka. So your first card at the center is the heart of the person in front of you. Dead center. The heart of the person in front of you. What is it that they're carrying within? The second card, you lay it right down on top of the first card. So they're like this. Setting it like that. One on top of the other, you know, like this. And that second card is, how is the world meeting this person? So that first is their heart. What's their heart's desire? What's their heart's truth? And the second is, how is that heart being met by the world? The third card, which you lay sideways across the first two, so that it's like this, see, like this, is, some people call this the crossing card, or the obstacle card, or the block, or the whatever. I call this card the situation in need of immediate attention. This is what's going on that would mitigate, challenge, or cause an obstacle to this going forward. Down below, we have the Queen of Swords. So your next card is down below this little array of 3. Down below that is, and this is, why is this happening right now? Why is this happening right now? The lesson. To the immediate left of the central array, you have this card is the past, or what is the person bringing into this situation from the past. So it could be past events, or it could be qualities that they've learned or skills they've learned in the past that they're bringing forward. Card number 6. Yeah, card number 6 goes directly above the central array. I'm just going to show you where we're at on the computer screen so far, so that you can see. So the card above in this one is the World, and that is the present. What are the current influences that are aligning themselves in this situation?
Tell me again, please. I'm sorry.
Yep, it's the present and the current circumstances that are aligning themselves in this situation. Then, to the immediate right of the central array, you put 2 cards, one and then another, the short-term and the long-term outcome. The short-term outcome usually represents 6 months.
This one is like short term?
Yep, the first one, short-term outcome, usually represents about 6 months in the future. The long-term outcome can represent a year or more, but when you get over there, the timing might be different. Like I'm looking at this being 8 months from now. This is being like over the next 8 months, because I have an 8 of Cups here.
Oh, so 8 months. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, but what would you say generally that would
Generally, this would be anywhere from 6 to 12 months
6
away.
okay.
So this is like 0 to 6 months, and this is 6 to 12 months.
Okay.
But don't be too stuck on that, because your timing will be your timing. And then finally, one card below the immediate future. So it's to the right of the lesson and below the immediate future. And I'm just going to hold it up so you can see. I know. I'm gonna make graphics of these spreads and send them to you. I swear. By the end of the class, you'll have graphic spreads of all these spreads. But I just haven't had time to do it this week. So that card down there is what should she do? What's the next step? So we have the shorter and the longer term outcome. What's likely to happen? But what's Anka's next step in this? Is what's answered by this card. So now I'm going to perform the reading. So you know the spread. Spread is past, present, future with influences, obstacles, situations in need of immediate attention, lessons, and what's going to happen. So there's a lot going on in this Anka. None of it is talking about art, which is interesting. But I think it's because your desire to teach art is coming from, I feel like you have this desire to do something, and teaching art seems like it might satisfy it, but that it's what the actual desire for what you want to do is more nebulous than just merely teaching art. Because you're, I know, an art person, and your reading shows that, you know, and so now I'm going to talk you through it. So at Anka's heart is the 5 of Cups reversed, which indicates a sadness. There's something sad and unfulfilled here. There's like some feeling of sorrow. There's the 5 of Cups, as I have referenced multiple times today in our class alone, is one of those cards that's about sadness, walking away from something, feeling like you're abandoned or you've abandoned someone or something. And I know that you studied art in the past, and now you're, you know, a medical professional, but you had this life as an artist and this dream as an artist. So maybe there's something here at your heart that's like feeling just like, oh, I just so feel the call of creativity, and that's my passion, and I miss it, and I long for it, and I want more of that in my life. Would you say that that's a fair characterization?
Yeah.
That you're feeling this motivation to connect with something that's sort of been lost, you know, or has been not as prominent in your life?
No. Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's still active in my life,
Mhm.
but for the past, I don't know, it's been a while. So maybe I would say like 6 months. I've
Mhm.
had like the desire to make art, but I can't, like, I'm like there's an oppression. Like, I
Mhm.
just can't.
There's a block,
block. Yeah.
which we're going to talk about in a second.
Okay.
So the 5 of Cups says you at your heart, you're feeling like, you know, you've been pulled away from something, or you've walked away from something, or it's just not clicking.
Okay.
Our Justice card, where is the world meeting your desire, is Justice. Such an interesting card. It's saying that, you know, you're not in balance between your artistic part of yourself and the other parts of yourself. So maybe you've been really busy at your job, you've been busy with work, you've been doing a lot of paperwork. The Justice card is officialness, our favorite, you know, and you've had a lot of like duty bound things to do.
Yes.
So you've been feeling a little bit like, maybe like you look at art and it's like over there and it's like, I love you, but like I can't get to you
Totally.
because I have all this over here, officialness I'm dealing with. And then this obstacle, the situation in need of immediate attention, is the 6 of Wands, which is validation from one's superiors. So when we come to the 6 of Wands as the obstacle here, it's saying there's a part of you that you feel isn't being seen in the world. And I would argue that this is why you're wanting to teach an art class. Because if you just wanted to make art, you'd just make art, right? Except you have all this officialness going on that you have to deal with. But what it's saying here is that you want to be witnessed making art. You want people to think of you as an artist. It's almost like you're wanting that outside sense of validation as an artist. It's almost like your own life, you've gotten so up close with business stuff here that it's hard for you to see yourself as the artist that you know you are, even though you know you are. And it's hard for you to come into balance to make time to do it. So you know that if you put it out there in the world, you'll have the mirror of all these people, you know, who take your class, seeing you as an artist, which will reinforce your knowing that you're an artist. And 2, that it will carve out time, because you're now responsible to these students to force you to do art. So it's sort of like what I see in this is that you're going to create a stream of officialness around your art to force you to do it, since you know you'll do officialness. And that's been, you know, the zeitgeist. And so that may, you know, maybe, you know, and then there's, but the challenge of this is, I think, because you want to teach this art class, but there's a fear of what if nobody shows up?
Which card are we
We're still on that 6 of Wands, because the 6 of Wands is about recognition. So there's both I'm feeling like I'm not seeing myself as an artist. Other people aren't seeing me as an artist. Does that mean I'm even an artist? If a tree falls in the forest and no one makes sound, what happens? But there's also, but what if I go out on a limb and I take that risk and I do it and nobody signs up? So there's been this stuck place.
Well, it's more like when people take an art class, like for me, when I look, if I'm going to take an art class, I'm going to go with a known entity. You know what I mean? I'm going to go with someone who's shown, has a body of work that I really like.
And so maybe are you
And
feeling
I
a little
don't have
insecure?
a huge body of work anymore. Well, I've sold a lot of it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's gone,
It's
and
gone.
it's not, you know, and maybe it's not as current because the last several months you've been bogged down in officialness. So,
Yeah.
so there's definitely questions around here. Will people sign up? Will they come? Will they see me as an artist? Will they recognize me as an artist? Can I be an artist amidst my officialness?
Right.
Okay, so now we've cut the cluster at the center of this whole dynamic. So down here, this Queen of Swords is down here. And the Queen of Swords, remember, she's the no bullshit lady. She's the pin you to the wall, get an answer out of you kind of lady. She's very tough. She's very strong. The Queen of Swords also tends to be very ideas oriented, lots of ideas. So she's in your lesson. Why is all this happening right now? And that's partly why I think your desire to teach is so that you'll have to report to your students. Because
it'll happen.
It will force
it's
it.
happening.
Yeah, it will force you to have to do art. You will have to show up. You will have to demonstrate techniques. You will have to do it. And, you know, so in this way, your inner disciplinarian comes out and goes, here, let's do it this way, because then it'll force you to do it. So I feel like that's one great thing about the Queen of Swords. The other thing is that I want to just say, I wonder what might happen if, in fact, you taught a class that wasn't exactly about making art, but if it was a class about art review, critique, analysis, etc., so that you're with people who want to look at art and engage with art. And then if they liked your interpretations, or if they liked the things that you say about art, or if they felt like they got value out of it, then maybe they would take an art class with you because they would trust you. And they would be like, oh, well, I would like to create something, and I like how she looks at art. Maybe you're supposed to talk about artistic methodologies. Maybe it's not that you're supposed to say, come paint like me.
Right. No, it wouldn't be that.
It wouldn't be that.
I wasn't even thinking that it would be that at all. It was more about, like, you know, painting from your inner world.
Which also goes well with the Queen of Swords, because she often creates in solitude, because there's that lonely element to her, but there's something really nice about that. That's a positive of the lonely element, is that she creates in solitude. So I think there's something here that you might think about, the marriage of a class that has some intellectual aspects as well as some creative aspects, as well as maybe a regular go home and DIY, you know, we're going to do some studio work here, but we're actually going to concept here, and we're going to go home and articulate in private.
Mm.
And then we'll come back and we'll workshop. So maybe there's something that might happen here that would be innovative and a little different.
Okay.
The past, the Three of Cups, but reversed, says you have been an artist, you've been very artistic, and that you've been socially artistic, as in doing work, sharing it, letting people see your work in the past. But the world up above, as current, says that time has come to an end. That audience is no longer automatically with you. I know you've moved up here from somewhere else, so there may be that you had an audience for that in the past.
I had a gallery of this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you had your own gallery. You had a place.
No, I have
or
a gallery that shows my work.
Mhm.
I still have access to it,
Mhm.
but I haven't sent anything.
And did you have a following there that maybe hasn't followed you here, or
No.
No, you didn't
No.
have any kind of community around it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so well, the Three of Cups tends to be a pretty social card. It tends to be about people in groups creating. Did you teach art classes before?
No.
No. So
I mean, if it's in the past, how
Mhm.
far in the past is it? Because
it can be any time in the last 3 to 6 years.
no,
No. Okay, so in the last 3 to 6 years, you haven't done anything socially artistic.
not in a group. No.
Okay. Well, maybe that's why it's reversed then in that case. Because this is saying there is some aspect of successful community art, maybe showing or sharing in your past. But that where you are now, the world, that era is at an end.
Mhm.
And it's not been the same as it used to be. So even if you still have access to the gallery, maybe your work is changing, maybe your desires are changing, and maybe your audience will be changing. And, who knows what will happen if you went back to that gallery now. Maybe they would say yes, but maybe they would say, oh, we changed focus, or,
Right.
something like that. So this world card up here is saying, whatever you do, don't go backwards. Go forwards with something different than you've ever done before. Do something that's unknown to you, because that's where the excitement is. What is that little smile?
Well, I went through a period of, doing all those work on those skulls, and that's what sold in all the galleries.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one that I'm almost done with, and I can't finish it. It's not like. And then I thought, I don't want to buy another one to work on another one.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a different project.
A whole
in
different
mind, a whole
project.
different
Great.
project.
Okay, good. So your style is changing. So that also, let's just look in context, might be a reason why you desire to teach. Because through teaching, you're going to get a chance to share and develop your own new work. It'll give you that opportunity.
Mm.
So I think there's something really nice about that. There's a changing of the guard in your work. And the other thing I'd like to say, just with this world up here and the Queen of Swords down here, is just to put it in your mind, I wonder if you need to organize an art class, or if you need to organize an art retreat, which would be more like, here, handful of people, come with me somewhere in the world, travel with the world card, to a beautiful location where we will, for a period of time every day, spend time together workshopping. But the rest of the time, with this Queen of Swords, we'll be in solitude just creating. Like we're in our huts in the jungle creating, So think about whether it's a class you need to offer, or whether it might be, and here's the thing, if somebody were like, there are people out there who might, if they were signing up for an art class, they might be like, oh, I want to look at someone's body of work and see what they've done. And now you're like, well, my style is changing and I don't really know what I'm going to be creating. And I can show you my past body work, but maybe it's going to be different now. But there are definitely people all over who don't even care, who are like, Bali, I'm there. Art retreat in Bali, let's go. And they want to go be in a beautiful place doing art. And they don't really care, they don't really care, if you're famous or not famous. What they care is Do I have 3 meals a day, a place to sleep, and a place to create? You know, so maybe there's something there that would be useful to you. The card of the successful student, Page of Swords, shows up. I think it's pretty great that we have both an opportunity to analyze the Page of Swords and the Queen of Swords in this reading today.
So we're at current circle?
Yep, now we're at short-term future. Page of Swords. Page of Swords indicates that if you were to go in the direction of developing your next offering, it probably would go well and people probably would sign up to study with you. The card of the successful student. It says, if you are committed to the learning process, people will want to learn with you. You know, it's less about you having something to teach. And I think that's really important to dismantle the evil little whispers of the ego that say, what if I don't have a thing? And what if people don't sign up? You know, all that of this 6 of Wands. The really nice thing about the Page of Swords says, no, we're going to explore together. Come on an exploration with me. Let's learn together. You're not, I'm the expert. I'm also the student and we'll learn. You know, and there's something really nice about that. So that might be really useful for how you position your class is we're going to learn this technique, you know, or we're going to study this thing, or we're going to do this thing in a different way, you know. So there's something, I see a little smile there.
Well, hey, we can all go to Italy and learn to do, you know,
Yes.
what's glazing.
Yes, let's glaze. I don't even care. Let's go eat pasta and glaze. That sounds great. Okay, so this Page of Swords says, you know, go in a different direction, be the student along with your students, position yourself as that you're learning too. And then the longer term outcome, 8 of Cups, says you are walking away from something. There is a walking away process over the long term. And I do think that you're right, that your style is going to change. I think it may be that the era of the skulls is done.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but there's something different. And that different thing is yet to fully emerge. You've got ideas about it, and it says here you want to go and learn how to do it yourself and practice a little, but that you are walking away from something. And the other thing that I see in this is that if you did an art class, it wouldn't really be so much to gain a following, because I don't know that that's necessarily your motivation anyway, but it would be about having an experience, and then that experience would be done. So, you know, ultimately you might be like, okay, I did that. Now I'm going to go do something else. The 4 of Cups, your next step, is reversed. And it's, you know, the 4 of Cups is about a lot of different things. It's a sort of a slippery card. One of the things that it's about that I think is important here is where it relates back to this 3 of Cups back here, which is, don't create. My advice to you with this would be, don't create based on what you think anyone else wants you to do. Create based on what you want to do. Don't teach based on what you think other people want to learn. And maybe you've been feeling a little stuck with that 6 of Wands. It's like, what would people want to study, and how would they want, and what do they want to see in a teacher, and da-da-da. It's not even about that. You should do what's in your heart to do, and ignore really what anybody else's opinion about it is, because the people who are meant to work with you on this will find you, and they will work with you on whatever this new modality is. But on the whole, I do feel like it's time for you to go forward in taking a step to pursue this vision. And if it were me with this reading, I would say, don't position yourself as the teacher, position yourself as the facilitator and co-learner. Lead a trip rather than do a longer class. Make it an experience that has a culmination point, and then let it go and walk away. You know, where you go and you do a thing, and then you let it go and you walk away, and ignore what anybody else's agenda is for your creativity, and just stay true to your vision. And that's going to be the key to you being successful in this. So it's less about a formal, making it officialness, and teaching a class and getting your name out there and all those things that feel so laborious. And it's definitely not about what you've created in the past. It's about doing something fresh in a fresh container. And that it doesn't actually matter who comes along or doesn't come along. What matters is that you're doing it. And then the people will find you who are meant to follow that. So that's my interpretation of this. Anybody see anything that I failed to see? Any feedback here?
I just want to know if the fifth card, the recent past, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, recent past.
Past,
What you're bringing from the past.
to the
Any questions from the online gallery here? Okay, go ahead, Devora.
Was there a name to that spread that you did?
Yes, this is I call this my all-purpose spread.
Oh, you call it that? Okay, formally. All right, got it.
Not a sexy name, but very descriptive.
It's workable.
Yeah, right. I'm a Taurus. I like to name things what they are.
All right,
Is the
that
all
works.
spread. And you can
Thank
use
you.
any question, you can use it for anything. It'll shed light on almost any situation. And it will help you to see really what you are going to, potentially have up against you in a situation and where things are going to go.
I guess my question would be, if you said you didn't see a lot of art cards, what would be some cards that you'd be looking for to support that?
Cups are related to the arts, particularly the Queen and King of Cups, but also the Page and Knight of Cups. The Page of Cups particularly. I think, there are other, the Empress is a creative card, is an
Maybe the
artist
Magician.
card. Sometimes it might be the Magician. The Three of Pentacles is an artistic card about multiple different kinds of mediums or different things you're doing. So I don't see that this is really, that this reading isn't actually about Anka's body of work. It's about Anka's methodology and how she goes forward with her offering. And that's what's come up. And it's sort of saying here that once she has her structure or methodology for how she would go forward and teach, then she can do whatever she wants inside that structure and methodology. So this isn't going to tell me to tell her, go toward pastels, or go toward, oil painting or sculpture. It's going to tell me more, this is how you could structure your life so that you'd have more art in it, which seems to be the main motivation of the reading. Thank you. That's a great question.
I've always wondered this about the cards. Like, is there an interplay with the person who's being read, their consciousness and divine consciousness? So could the person that's being read be projecting out, and then, like, you know what I mean? Like, is there
Yes.
some things where you're reading the cards and it's actually what they're
Thinking, feeling,
yes.
or experiencing.
their questions?
This is a fantastic question. This is exactly right. We're going to address this question again in another way later on in
Okay.
the class, but I will answer now that when people sit down in front of me and they say to me, how did you know how did you know about that? I tell them, and I mean it. And they think I'm just being humble or something, but it's not. I'm really telling them, I don't know anything. You already know everything. My job is to read everything in the energy around you and tell you what it's saying that you can't hear. So yes, a person's projections and in concert with their divine guidance,
Okay.
and in concert with their ancestors and their guides and their guardians and all of it, it's all there. It's all there. Like, everything I need to know about Anka as an artist for the purpose of this question is already, it wrote in on Anka. I don't have to know anything. And but not joking, I'll tell people, like, I'm going to go home, smoke pot, and watch Star Trek. Like, I don't have an investment here in where this goes. I'm just the tarot reader. I don't know anything, but you already know everything. And you just don't know that you know everything. My job is to kind of go in and, like, clean it up, sort it out, and put it on a plate and serve it to you so that you can digest it. So I do think that the querent's state of mind absolutely has an impact on the reading. I don't think that the querent can project anything that would be untrue to them.
Okay.
I think even when they're projecting their fears, then you get the Nine of Swords and you go, well, you're projecting a lot of fear, but it doesn't look like those will pan out, right? You can, sort of walk through it. The cards will show you, but you can definitely see as you go through a reading with somebody. And it happens like this, that you'll say something and they'll go, wow, that's crazy. I literally was just having this conversation with my friend on the phone this morning, or I was just talking to my mom about this. And you're like, yeah, I know you were, because it's all over you. It's all over you like a stain on your shirt. It's as clear to me as if you spilled ketchup on yourself. Not in a bad way, but just like it's so visible. So, keep in mind that the package of energy everyone carries, me and everyone else, the package of energy that we carry around our bodies contains, and within our bodies contains all the answers already. And our job as readers is to go in and fish out all of that and to put it in some discernible order, which is why the storytelling from last week is so important. We put it in a discernible order so that they can see it. And it's a negotiation, like I said something, Anka said, well, yes, but no, a little bit, you're close, but not exactly. That's normal, to leave room for, okay, like I might say to somebody, oh, seems like your partner is really jealous. And they're like, well, not really jealous, but just tends to be very like adamant about their own opinions. Okay, there's an element of control here. And I was in the shades of variation of it. And our job as readers is to get better and better at being in those shades of variation. And so that we can learn, so we can go, oh, okay, I can sense that. I can see there's degrees. So, okay, I think we're just about at the end of our time for today. We are. Oh, I'm a little over time. I'm so sorry. So it's 6:05. Your homework for this week is to go home and practice this spread. To go home and do one for yourself and one for someone else, a past, an all-purpose spread. And if you've been doing daily draws, please continue to do those. If you haven't been, that's fine. You don't have to do anything extra special about the Suit of Swords this week. Just, you've written down the notes from today, go through and just review them. And when you're doing your readings, if something comes up and you get a swords card in your reading and it has a meaning to you, write it in your notebook so that you're starting to really build your personal dictionary of what these symbols mean. Everybody in the computer and everybody in the room, thank you so much. And thank you, Anka, for sharing your question with us today. That was a great question. It gave us a lot to explore. And I want to come to Tuscany and eat pasta and paint in a vineyard with you, or learn terracotta glazing or something.
I was thinking Bali's.
Thank you.
Bali is also nice, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, everybody. And I'll send out the recording this week. Bye.
Well, a lot of people know